Hello and welcome to DisruptED TV, where every little idea can make potentially a big difference in your classroom or your school. And our guest today is Brian Kulak, who is the Chief Academic Officer of the Collingswood Public School System. And before that, he was a teacher of English and journalism. Brian, it's a pleasure to have you on
Thanks
the
for
program.
having me. I
Hello,
appreciate
Brian.
it. Yeah, looking forward to it.
And your idea, Brian, is something called flash lessons,
Correct.
which is something you've created. So maybe you can walk us through an example.
Sure. So an example would be when a teacher, a K-12 teacher, is interested in having a flash lesson. He or she reaches out to me and tells me what she just finished, what she's doing, or what she's about to do, and then she gets out of the way. So with that idea, I plan a lesson for which she will be a student in her own class. I don't tell her anything about what's going to happen. The only thing I ask is that she raises her hand when I ask for a question or a response. And if there's some sort of comment that I need to get the conversation going, she's the first person I call on. I want the kids to see that teacher as a student in her own class every time they walk into her class. Otherwise, she's the expert at the front of the room. She's creating the lessons. In this case, having no idea what's coming other than the topic that she provided, the kids and the teacher get to see each other in a different way. Also, and I think this is a really important part of it, they get to see me in a different way. So as a district administrator, it's very difficult to get in the classrooms as much as I want to, but I do as often as I can.
And this kind of forces that.
This kind of forces it.
Yeah.
However, it's really important to know, and I get this question a lot, I only do it if I'm invited. So the vampire rule, you have to be invited into the house for it to be
right,
in the
okay,
house. If I never do another flash lesson, it's because nobody asked. I would never impose myself.
You'd
upon a
never
teacher.
impose yourself
Never.
on a
I
teacher,
think
but your
that's
teachers are all made aware of the fact that you can do this for them.
right. So
Any subject.
Any subject.
Okay.
I've done chemistry, I've done public speaking, ELA is my background, as you mentioned. I've not gotten into math yet. I think that would be really
That'd be a stretch.
outside my comfort zone, but I would do it.
Uh-huh.
And before I got here, I got a request for a physics lesson, so I'll work on a physics. when I
A
get back.
flash lesson on
Flash
physics.
lesson
How
on
long-
physics. We'll see how it goes.
That should be fun.
Yeah,
I'll
it should
come
be.
for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But how long is a flash lesson?
So our class periods are 55 minutes or 84 minutes. It's a staggered schedule, so it's a full period. So if the flash lesson ends early, it just opens up the Q&A, or I thank the class for having me in, and then we do a feedback loop. So the feedback loop is on Google Forms. There's one specific for the teacher and one specific for the kids.
Okay.
The teacher gets a chance to kind of break down the lesson as if he or she were the administrator. So it flips that script of Danielson or Marzano or whatever you're using so that he or she can tell me how I could have improved. The kids get a chance to comment on the lesson as a whole, particularly by way of what the content was. So here you have a person who's coming in who's likely not an expert, going back to that physics example,
Right.
who could completely botch the lesson, and the kids and the teacher having an opportunity to talk about how it could have gotten better, or if I were able to come back in, what I could do differently. And then the whole dynamic between the teacher, myself, and the kids changes.
Okay, so it's registering with me now.
Okay.
I mean, the parallel with flash mobs is
Yep,
almost a
it's
performance experience.
Very similar. Yep.
In that you're staging something, it's almost spur of the moment.
Yep.
Turnaround time, I guess, from the time they ask to the
That's a
time you do it.
great question. I get that question a lot too,
How long does that
because it depends on the content. So the second flash lesson I ever did 3 years ago was on chemistry, and thermochemistry to be specific. And I don't know anything about thermochemistry. I mean, it was a Google search knowledge only. So it took me about a week, and that's where you have to really kind of look at your schedule, honor the teacher's schedule, and say, if you want me on this day, tell me on this day at what time, and I will make it happen. So
I'll
my
make sure that
schedule,
happens.
my schedule gets rearranged no matter what, barring some sort of emergency, obviously, and then I will give that class period my full attention the way we expect teachers to every day.
Is this available in any school district?
Well, right now it's just in Collingswood.
Okay.
However, so many people have reached out through Edutopia. I got to present on it in St. Louis at the NCTE CEL
Great.
conference
Okay.
in November, and then most recently at ESET to NJPA at the College of New Jersey. So all kinds of folks from around the country have asked for examples.
Great.
So I created a Google Doc and gave examples of the 4 or 5 lessons I've done that I'm most proud of and I think could work, and I just share it. So the best thing about this is it's my idea. We had talked about that a little bit earlier, that it is my idea, but I want everybody to use it in any way they see fit, and that's kind of what educators should do, kind of steal from each other, yeah.
Collingswood Public Schools is a big enough school district to have a chief academic officer.
Yes.
There's some
Yep.
school districts that might be smaller.
Correct.
But flash lessons are something teachers could do for each other.
Great idea. So I think there's a growing teacher-to-teacher model through which teachers go into each other's classrooms with support from administrators. They get coverage and they just look at people work. Now, it could be their friends, it could be within their content area, but the really invested teachers who want to get better go look at all kinds of teachers. So I do think that this would be a great opportunity. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm glad that you brought it up, whereby a teacher goes in and does a flash lesson for a colleague on something that colleague might struggle with, I don't care if it's content or what, and then invite me in as kind of a third party to watch the whole thing unfold, because I don't need to be on stage. This is all about the teachers. So it hasn't gotten to that point yet, but I don't see why it couldn't.
Why it couldn't?
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
So if I'm in Collingswood,
Yep.
I teach history,
Yep.
and I want to do something on the Civil War
Yep.
in the form of a flash lesson, I call Brian Kulak.
Yep.
Tell him I need it in a week,
Yep.
or I'd like to do this in about a week,
Right.
and you tell me whether you can.
Yep.
And then you pull something together and you teach my class. I sit as a student
As
in
a
my
student,
own
you
class.
have no idea what's coming. Yep.
And you do and you apologize. So you're not a history teacher. This
of the
is
first
I'm
things I
going to
say.
do my best here.
Yep.
And it's possible it'll fail, but you fail forward.
Right, I love that point, because I've been pretty fortunate that while all of them haven't gone exactly to plan, like any teacher's lesson on any given day, they've all been received pretty well. I think the vulnerability of the teacher to invite an administrator in, first of all, is paramount. Secondly, understanding that I'm not there to be on stage and put on a show and leave. I want the teacher to get better, and I want to get better as a leader.
That's what it's about.
All about that, and,
Okay.
and I can't stress that enough. If it fails, the first thing I want to find out is why, and it's to the teacher I go, and then to the kids I go. So
Okay.
I will reflect on it myself, but they need to be able to tell me as their leader what I could be doing better. So the days of leaders sitting in offices and kind of thinking about ways to lead are gone, at least in Collingswood. We are progressive, we are very teacher focused, we have a great staff. Frankly, I don't know how many places this would work in. You need to have a staff who's willing to accept an administrator in the room.
Let's explore that, because you can get pushback from
For sure.
teachers.
Yep.
But then again, the vampire rule. You
Yep.
don't just walk in.
Right.
You're invited in.
Right.
Some teachers, I guess, are more receptive to this idea
Yep.
than others are.
Great question. So the team community app called Slack is where this whole idea started. So
Okay, talk about Slack.
Sure. About 3 years ago, a bunch of teachers started a Slack channel. Basically, it's just a private workplace chat area.
Slack is like a task management.
Excellent. It's a good,
project management.
better way to put it, right?
Right, okay.
And the teachers...
It's free.
It's totally free, totally run by whoever becomes the administrator of that group, just like a Facebook group or Twitter chat. And this group of teachers that I call my tribe, there was probably 8 or 10 of them at the time, just started posting about teaching and learning and struggle and instruction. Then it kind of went into pop culture and really started to build a community of teachers, and they're all very young, fresh, excited, and then they invited me. So that in itself was a win for me, because I was a new administrator at the time, I was coming from a new district, I wanted to learn as much as I could about everybody. So to be invited, knowing that part of the divide between teachers and administrators is often that there's a bit of a spy, it's a bit of a gotcha, all those cliches I can't stand. That's not what this was. So as the conversation went on, and then a month later, kept going very organically. I remember it was a Sunday, and I thought to myself, I desperately miss teaching. And I think being a part of that Slack channel and watching them talk about with such passion their classes, I pitched the idea. I said, I have an idea. It's called a flash lesson, and I did get it from Flash Mob, so you were prescient there. Here's what I'm thinking. If nobody wants to do this, I totally get it. It's fine. A couple days later, the first person asked me to come in. She's in seventh grade.
Was that physics?
That was not. That was the second one. No, the first one was ELA, public speaking.
Okay.
Seventh grade, which was
Okay.
amazing. The second one was the thermochemistry. And I have to tell you, when I walked out of that thermochemistry room, I was exhausted and I was on a high. I was so excited about what those kids did during that lesson. For a stranger, it was a very low level chemistry class. The teacher won Teacher of the Year that very year, and then unfortunately we lost her to Stanford. She's doing research in Stanford. She's amazing.
Good for her.
But it was just an amazing experience, and at that point I said to myself, if it goes away tomorrow, I have this in my back pocket.
I have this in my back pocket.
If not, could you guys start talking this up a little bit, because I really want to do it more? And then from there it just kept going and
It
going.
hasn't gone away.
It's not gone away.
I mean, so there's a growing enthusiasm
There
for
is.
that in
Yep.
Collingswood.
In Collingswood, and across the nation now that people have kind of reached out, and I've kind of given them kind of a roadmap about how to make this work.
We've also developed a culture in Collingswood that allows people to take a risk.
Yep.
And not feel intimidated by it.
It's really a great point. So the risk taking, again, is one of those cliches that we keep hearing. You want teachers to take risks. You want kids to take risks in their learning, and it's very true. But it's one thing to use as a cliche, and another thing to actually do it.
Right.
So for our teachers, of whom I don't know how many there have been now, a dozen or so, who have had me in and then had me in several other times, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Sure.
I would love, and what's kind of started to happen, back to your point about teachers doing it for each other, as a supervisor of secondary supervisors, I've asked them to start thinking about doing this a little bit more. So I have one gentleman who runs the ELA and social studies secondary departments. He didn't do a flash lesson, but he did a guest lesson. Way outside his comfort zone. It's been outside the classroom about 10 years, and I was so proud of him. He invited me in to see it. It was on the First Amendment, which he's very passionate about. He was a social studies teacher. So even that little small step for a person who hasn't been in the classroom for a while, was super nervous. We talked about the plan and what he was going to do, and he talked to the teacher about it, who's a first-year teacher, and went off brilliantly. I was just so proud of him. So even if that were the case, that this is not what they do, but they get back into the classroom, that's what I want. I
It's
think
a great experience
I just
because
think
it's
that-
about education, and you don't want anybody to forget what it's like.
and I don't know
to
how
be
that
in a
happens, to
classroom.
be honest with you, Al. So many people become administrators and then kind of throw their hands up at what they used to be.
Right, yeah.
That's not what, I mean, I miss it too much. So,
Well,
if I can get back in.
Your superintendent loves this idea.
Well, my superintendent is, how do I put it? He hasn't been in to see one. I haven't invited him to see one. He hasn't balked at it. He's a busy man. We talked about it during an evaluation of mine, and he had a lot of questions about it. And he knew at that time that teachers were starting to be a buzz about it. So he's kind of let me do my thing. And that's one thing about him. He's the best leader I've ever worked for. His name is Dr. Scott Oswald. And he has been hands off in this way and has given this title, Chief Academic Officer, such freedom to do things like this, because I told him I really want to be the supporter of our teachers to create teacher capacity and teacher leadership, and he's kind of let me run with it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah,
And it's such a, to me anyway, it's an opportunity to do interdisciplinary teaching.
It is.
Stuff which
Yep.
most teachers generally fall into a subject area.
Correct.
And get comfortable with
Yep.
that. This is also disruptive from the point of view of a curriculum.
It
because
is.
it just sort of pops up in the middle of the school year.
It is, and some of the feedback I've gotten that hasn't been so positive is just that what you expect teachers to stop what they're doing for you, and the answer again is never. The only reason they do it is because they found a way to either pause what they're doing, or it provides a great backdrop at the end of a unit, or it's a way to start a unit. And enough kids have seen me now in my 4th year. My office is in the middle school that I'm not that much a stranger, so it's not that off-putting. To the point at which now, when I do it, it's people understand what a flash lesson is when I come in now. So I really do think that the parallel between me missing the classroom and doing this is not as selfish as it might sound, although in the very beginning on Slack, I pitched it. Look, guys, I'm selfish. I miss it. I just need a chance to get
Give me a
back
chance
in.
to get in front of,
Yeah.
get in front of
But
your
it's
classroom.
never outside the scope of what's happening, let's say in that 7th grade English class, or the chemistry teacher didn't say, let's try thermochemistry, Brad, you want to come in? She was at the end of a unit, and she said, this might be a good time. It was December, I'll never forget, it was December 19th, so it was the end of the first semester. It was a good time for it. She has in-class support in there and a very low group, and it was just that experience kind of, I always go back to when people say, if this is about you or if it's a selfish pursuit, I just go back to that lesson and remind them that it's not.
And if the teachers, if they embrace this idea, they'll find time to do it.
That's a great
They
point.
will, and
Yep,
let's see
yep.
that, finding the time. Let's explore that. That's a great question,
That is a
Joe.
good point,
So,
yeah.
so if we have a couple of teachers, let's say in Montana, who
Okay.
are
Yep.
watching our program, and we do,
Yep.
and they're talking to each other and saying, hey, maybe we could do these flash lessons for each other.
Yep.
How much time will it take me to prepare a flash lesson for a class? Joe?
Okay, great question. So I think it depends on the person. So I think there are people who would watch this episode or hear this idea or have read the pieces I've written on it and say, "Oh, that's not for me." For those people, they could certainly then farm it out to people for whom it would
Invite
apply.
somebody to do a
right,
flash
right,
lesson.
Exactly. The time it takes, I think, depends on the amount of time that person is willing to put in. And here's an example. One of the best experiences I had is my only experience in elementary school as a 1st grade class. And the teacher was a student of mine many years ago. So that was cool off the bat. So her name is Danielle, and she said, Mr. Kulak, would you mind coming in and doing a flash lesson for my 1st graders? Totally outside my comfort zone. I've never been outside anything below anything 10th grade. So that was the lowest I've ever gone. I taught mostly seniors for most of my career. When I tell you how hard I worked for that stinking lesson, I mean, I took a picture of it and I showed it to her. My living room was a mess. I had giant easel paper, pencils, crayons.
Storyboarded everything.
I was so nervous. And guys, I was sweating so profusely. And then when those kids who were terrified when I got there, man, elementary, deep voice, they don't know who I am.
Sure.
They started way back on the rug, and then what I did was a Mad Lib. You're comfortable with Mad Libs from
Right,
right?
sure.
A Mad Lib about Miss Massey, so the kids could work on their parts of speech.
Okay.
So, and Danielle didn't know what was coming. She sat and she participated, but slowly, the kids crept up, you know,
Sure.
kids
They
do.
leaned into
so they
it.
leaned in, and then I have a
Okay.
picture, a great picture that I put up for Edutopia too, where they're in my lap. Now I have little ones at home, so I'm not foreign to what little kids are like, but to be in that atmosphere for the first time as a teacher was terrifying, but it was amazing. So I would say to you, if you really wanted to go well, which if you're going to try this, no one's going to try this and shoot for a C+ average.
Right,
You want to do
no.
it really
You're
well
gonna
because
win it.
otherwise
You're gonna
no
win
one
it
can-
out of the park.
Exactly. It'll be almost embarrassing and counterintuitive
Right.
if it doesn't work that way.
Sure.
You have to put in the amount of time you want. My suggestion would be for people listening, start with your comfort zone. So my first was 7th grade ELA. I
Right.
knew I could do it well. I knew I could tweak something she had done by way of public speaking in a way that was fun. And then the chemistry one, I said to myself, if I'm going to do this, and this is my personality, I'm sure the personality of your listeners, I'm all in, man. I'm going to do it as best I can.
Right.
So I do prepare at home, ravenously for these. And then if they go well, the feedback suggests that. If not, the feedback suggests that as well.
Well, there's no pressure if you're prepared.
That's true. It really shouldn't be. And that, again, models the preparation that we
Right.
want from our teachers.
That's up to, but the whole idea of breathing fresh air into a classroom
Yep.
with a different instructor,
Yep.
maybe from a completely different discipline,
Right.
Is compelling to me because it sounds like an exciting way to change things up with the students that gets them engaged, making making the teacher that invited you in a part of the class.
Right.
I think is brilliant.
Thanks.
I mean, I see that working very well.
It's not a period off. They have to work. They have to be a student, and it's
Right.
uncomfortable. So I call this controlled discomfort. So when I kind of pitch this to people, when I write about it, I want everybody to be as uncomfortable as they're
Sure.
able to be, and then let me work on making you more comfortable as the lesson goes on. And that's really the way it should be. As I mentioned in the pre-interview, when I taught for 15 years, I could not stand lecturing. I was prepared, I could lecture,
Right.
but I only lectured if I was introducing a novel or movement or something I had to do. Otherwise, the kids did the work. So at a time when that worksheet-based, skill and drill kind of instruction was the norm, I was kind of the opposite. So you had asked me earlier where this came from. It came from my time in the classroom.
You're more facilitator.
I just, Exactly. And I tried things in the classroom I knew it could be a disaster, and I told kids every time I did it, I said to the kids, I just thought of this, we're gonna try it. If it doesn't work, you tell me, and I'll never do it again or I'll make it better. And they did, because I had that kind of relationship with my kids, and now the same thing applies here.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned too, when we were talking before the program, I know your background is teaching English.
Yep.
So if a math teacher were to call you
Yep.
and say, Mr. Kulak, could you do a math flash?
Yeah.
That would be kind of a white knuckle experience.
It would, and I've not said no yet, and the only time a math teacher asked me to come in, we got snowed out, so I would have.
Okay.
And the idea was...
had that all prepared.
She wanted to do a debate on how to defend your process to arrive at, let's say, X, right? So
Okay.
there's different ways to get to X.
Right.
And she wanted kids to speak it using a public speaking platform that I use, and our district is very big on presentation literacy. So kids are up and kids are talking all the time. So I thought it was a great idea. I thought it was a creative way. She's a third year teacher, and the fact that she asked, again, let me just back up for a second. The personality of the person that asks is as important as anything else.
Sure.
So here's a girl who's in her third year. She's not tenured yet. She's probably chewing her nails as often as we all did before we were tenured. And she invites me in to do this, knowing I would do everything I could to help her.
Right.
Now, in this case, she asked me for something. So she said, can you do something on debate? I said, I will, but I'm not telling you what. So it was all ready to go, and then the snow happened, and then her schedule got whacked out, which goes back to, I'm not saying, hey, don't forget, you asked me to come in. That time passed. It didn't fit anymore, and then we moved on. So I had not been back in. So I would do whatever, if it were math, I would always find a way to figure out how math thinking can apply outside math in the same way that ELA thinking can work outside ELA.
Oh, sure.
So if you're trying to prove something,
I mean, you have to know how to think either way.
Exactly.
Whether you're expressing yourself mathematically or in English,
Right,
you need
right.
to have a thought first
Yep.
that is worthy of expression.
Yep.
And so I can see a lot of parallel in that.
And what I would probably do, to be honest with you, is tell the kids, I need your help.
Right, sure.
I would
That's-
I'm a math struggler. I still am. My daughter, who's 8, struggles in math, and it hurts my feelings. I think it's my fault, but
It's not hereditary.
no, I hope not. But I would tell the kids, listen, I'm here to try this thing with you. I hear you're an excellent class. You're skilled. Can you help me? Let's work. So I would probably pitch it back to them. They wouldn't know that they were being sort of positively manipulated into teaching the class or doing something that way. But that's probably how I'd approach a math
And they
lesson.
become engaged too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to lecture to a math class, that's for sure.
Now, the whole concept of flash lessons is new because you invented it
Yep,
pretty much.
yep.
Although there may be other teachers around who've
Sure.
done things like it. So if we got somebody watching the program and they're a little worried that they'd be starting from scratch just based on what they see on this program, you've written about this.
Yep, I've written
You've
about it.
developed a kind of a body of knowledge about this.
So I've written about it for Edutopia twice. The first was kind of a soup to nuts where it started, kind of things we're talking about today, and where it is now. Then I had some teachers write about their experience from their perspective, and we published that to Edutopia too. So I was kind of out of the piece altogether, so teachers who are thinking about doing this can hear other teachers talk about it. It's one thing for me to talk about it. So that bred 2 presentations on it, as I mentioned, one in St. Louis and one in TCNJ. So I do have a wealth of materials and ideas that I'll just give. You know, I know it's funny.
When we get to the end of the program, you'll get a chance to look in your camera, tell everybody how to reach you.
For sure, yeah.
But I want to ask you about the school board. Does the school board know you're doing this?
Yeah, so the school board is very progressive and young and relatively new. I don't know they know I'm doing it. I haven't talked about, see, that's one of the things that's difficult about this is, as I mentioned several times, I don't want this to be celebratory about me. So
sure.
If nobody knows about it, that's fine.
It's a method, it's a practice.
Exactly.
It's not a Brian Kulak
No,
thing.
it's not, and that's why
Right.
you know, we talked about me inventing it, but there's no patent on it. I just want people to,
You want
try
people to do
yeah,
it. I mean,
right.
that's what DisruptED TV is
Exactly
about.
right.
Right.
That's why this is a great forum for it. If the school board were to ask, or if someone would say I heard it, or one of them said, "Hey, I heard you in my kid's room doing a lesson. Tell me about it." I would do it, but I haven't done it on that scale. I've talked about it at faculty meetings, and teachers who have tried it have spoken about it at faculty meetings. Say, "Give Brian a try," and that's how I get clients or whatever the word is to try it. And the undulation kind of comes and goes. Sometimes I get 3 or 4 that are quick in a month or so, and sometimes it might be a while. And again, they know that I'm there if they need me, but never in a position.
Right.
Yeah,
Great. Do parents know about this?
that's a great question. So the picture I used for Edutopia, I had to get the parents' permission because children are in it. The 7th graders are in it.
Sure.
Right.
And you might remember this if you've seen the movie Dead Poet Society. In it, at the very end, Robin Williams' character is fired,
Right.
and all his the people who believed in him stood up on their desks and said, "Oh, Captain, my Captain."
Right.
That's what he taught them. So one of the activities I do is called "Oh, Captain, my Captain," public speaking based on that, and that was the 7th grade lesson I did for my first one. And in the picture, kids are standing up. So the parents who signed off on those waivers know that the kids
They
are
know
doing
that
it.
that's-
Right.
I hope kids are going home and saying, "Hey, we did this really cool thing today." I'm sure the first graders did, because you know first graders come home.
Oh, yeah.
They just
Sure.
chatter,
You know, I mean,
chatter.
eventually, and
Yeah.
you know, and you do raise a point. This is something that can happen at any grade level. I mean,
Absolutely.
your background. So you went all the way down to first grade
First
for
grade.
one of them.
Yep.
And it worked out better than you might have thought it would.
I hope so. Like I said, it was
Well.
terrifying, but yeah, it was a great experience.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, now we're coming up on the end of our program.
Okay.
So here's your opportunity, Brian, to tell everybody how to reach you.
Okay.
Learn more about how to do flash lists.
Okay, so you can reach me at bkulak11 on Twitter, which is where I'm most active. I do provide people who reach out a Google Doc, including everything we just talked about from first to last, including some sample lessons that you can either try or at least borrow ideas from. I'm happy to talk to anybody via email. The response across the nation has been pretty powerful. I've met people, obviously, I would never have met before. I work with Dr. Danielle Taylor at the Yale School, which is a special needs school in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We're going to present together at the National School Board Association on this. She tried it, so it's just something that I really want people to try, and all I will do is give you some guidance.
Well, you've given them plenty of information
Thanks
to
so much,
try
guys.
it
It was
with.
wonderful. I
So,
appreciate
Right,
it. Thank
pleasure.
you.
Brian
Yep.
Kulak, Chief Academic Officer, Collingswood Public Schools, terrific guest on DisruptED TV. My name is Al Cini,
I'm Joe Osamendi.
and we hope we'll see you again on a future episode of DisruptED TV. Thank you.